Welcome to Amadon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. I'm Joel Amadon. Let's get started. Today on episode 142, we're continuing our work of exploring ideas and conversations that lead to real learning and better teaching, which is perfect. We're talking about, because we're talking about the book TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking. I'm joined today by Dr. Marvin King, whose work on starting up TEDx and his experience with this book make him a perfect partner for this conversation. But before we dive in, if you enjoy Amadon Planet, the best way to support this work is to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps others find these conversations. You can also share the podcast with a colleague, reach out with ideas or questions by sending me a note to joel@amadonplanet.com, or another way to support is to join my email list for updates and ways to engage further. Also, we're talking about a book, and given that we're talking about a book here, we're trying to think about the learning that's there and also how it leads to better teaching. So this isn't a book report, right? It's a conversation. We're getting into all sorts of different aspects of the book. Some of the practical advice from the TED Talks book, some of the kind of the learnings or even perspectives it's offering. Like one of them that I'm going to highlight is about a good talk is about rebuilding an idea inside someone else's head. Kind of amazing. All right. And what does that mean for my own practice? Anyway, so it's not a book report, right? We're trying to think about how to apply this. If this conversation leads you to want the book, hey, guess what? I got a link for you in the show notes. If you use that link through Bookshop, it helps support the podcast and independent bookstores. All right. Thanks for being a part of this gathering. Now let's get into today's conversation with Dr. Marvin King on the book TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking by Chris Anderson, head of TED. Welcome, Marvin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey, so to get us started, I'd love to have you introduce yourself. What do folks need to know to get to find out where you're coming from?
Sure. So Marvin King, I'm an associate professor of political science. I have a joint appointment in African American Studies here at the University of Mississippi. I am working on a couple of books that should come out later this year, so I'm excited about
Nice.
that. And then I have a lot of involvement on campus and off campus. So uh, I've been on the Parks Commission, I was on the Planning Commission. I helped get our TED Talks launched here on campus many years ago, started a running club. And lately, the last few years, I've been serving as a witness, expert witness in federal redistricting trials.
Oh, wow.
So all of that keeps me busy. And then I'm also involved with advanced placement, um, scoring those exams and doing some. Um, I've kind of gone beyond that, but I kind of have a long backstory with advanced placement. So I try to dabble in a lot of things. If it interests me, I try to get involved.
Yeah. And wow. One, I think there's a lot of math in that redistricting uh, stuff
Yes,
that's going on with the geometry and stuff, or what
yes,
what the
yes.
mathematical definition of gerrymandering and all that good stuff,
Yeah,
or not
there's a lot.
not good stuff actually.
Well, right. I agree with you. There's a lot of math there. There's a lot of statistics and trying to determine some of the different standards that the courts are interested in um, do involve some mathematical precision, but also some estimations. And and that's kind of where the courts look at the different experts, and essentially asking whose whose models are most credible to the
Mm,
world that they know and understand.
wow.
And so I've done some work on that, and it's fun. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I
I,
can't imagine.
I have a break right now, and the Supreme Court has a decision coming up called Calais versus Louisiana, and depending on the outcome of that case will kind of determine how much more of this work continues or not. So we'll find out probably in June when the court releases its opinion.
Wow. I was part, or not part. I was lucky enough back in the day when I was at Wisconsin, a long time ago now, where they had a games and learning society group, and one of the great games that they had was a little flash game called the redistricting game. I don't know if you ever saw it, where you
I've probably seen something similar, but yes, where you can move around
yeah.
and create and exploit the other side.
Yeah, well, and you had to satisfy everyone, but then you also had to make sure it could pass by the board. Like, and it was like, oh, and you find you're creating these wild shapes where you're like, oh, this is why, given the politics of the situation, all the different constraints, why that this is the result of what we're talking about with regards to the districts. Where
Uh,
in Wisconsin, I know that there's these long strips of district, and I was like, why does this exist? And it's again because of all the probably the stuff that you're getting to testify about.
well, that's right. And Wisconsin is probably one of, I think alongside Texas, North Carolina, Wisconsin is arguably one of the, uh, has been at least one of the more gerrymandered states, where partisanship really defines those electoral boundaries. And, a lot of people debate about whether or not that should be the case. And it's true. Politicians in this way are choosing their voters.
Yeah,
It's not the other way around. And, I tend to come down on the side that that's really not how it should be done.
yeah,
And, but the law is the law is. And I could talk about this all day long.
yeah, yeah,
But, you know,
yeah. Who knows what this
I,
podcast is about now? Holy
I,
cow!
I just I think the court has made some mistakes,
Yeah,
and they've allowed the legislatures to redistrict based purely on partisanship,
yeah,
and I don't think that's healthy for the democracy.
right.
And so, whichever side, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think it's not really helpful in the long run.
Yeah, we want to be represented, right?
That's
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
So, this is great. Think about ideas, right?
Uh-huh.
So one, I think that one of the first things that I, I mean, one, we've been like parallel dads throughout. We've kind
Sure.
of had our kids in the same experiences and seen each other on soccer fields or at
That's right.
school events and stuff like that. But then also too when I think when you were started the TEDx UM event way back. I don't. When did you start that, or when did you all start that as you and the students?
2016
Yeah,
was our first year, and we ripped through it. We decided in late August to do it, and we put on the event at the end of October.
yeah.
And I would not recommend that at all.
That's
I would,
yeah.
that's not the way to do it. It
No.
worked, but that was hard.
So we had and so I had a chance to help out a little bit when I was around that, and I think maybe I was the next year that I kind of uh, started helping out. But at that experience of working with that crew and seeing the students and you and all that, like, what does that look like to make that event happen on campus and trying to represent the TED brand, and then thinking later and diving into TED Talks and just obviously getting into all the different ideas that you get kind of cascade over you if you start going on the TED site and just looking at all the different videos and having that experience. One, I knew you'd be a great person to talk about this book with, so thank you for being willing to come on. So we're talking about the TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking by Chris Anderson, the head of TED. It's a great title.
Great title.
Yeah, yeah. But before we get, so we're going to talk about that book and we're going to go through some of the questions here. But before we dive into that, what are some of your favorite TED Talks?
Well, sure. There's two in particular that I like. One, and I am blanking on the name, but for a while we had this program where me and the students we would go to a prison here in North Mississippi in Holly Springs, and we would watch TED videos with inmates,
Oh wow.
and that was deep.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those inmates were not coming out for a long time. They're still there, and some are probably released by now. And one of the ones we watched was, and I am blanking on the name. It's been a few years since I've watched it, but it was a essentially he was a guerrilla gardener in
Oh,
Los
yes.
Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Yeah.
a and he talked about how you have to take the initiative. He wanted to beautify Los Angeles, his neighborhood in Los Angeles. He wanted to clean it up. He wanted to set an example. He also wanted to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And, in many of these urban areas, fresh fruit and groceries aren't as easy to come by as you might otherwise think.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of uh, uh, convenience stores that are selling processed packaged food that's not and that's easy and convenient and it's cheap, but fruit and vegetables are often more expensive and harder to come by. And so he wanted to fix that, and so he started just planting wherever he could find a little extra dirt in Los Angeles. And what was odd is it was against the rules. There were some city rules about this. And so his talk, he talks about like, we have to do the right thing and we have to make it possible to be able to do the right thing. And, I live in a hard part of the city and I want to set an example for kids. Like, here's how you can get involved and do good in your community and not go down the path that might lead you to where you don't want to be. And I felt the my my students,
Yeah.
we're all over. My students were like, "Oh, that guy's tough," and I think the inmates were like, um, they could see themselves in him
Yeah.
as someone that kind of spoke their language of just having to scrape by
Mm-hmm.
and get by and kind of challenge the system. And
Yeah.
all he wanted to do was grow strawberries.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. Yeah.
this is this isn't he wasn't inventing anything here.
Right.
Uh, but that was a great talk. Uh, and then
And that's
probably
Ron Finley, by the way. Ron Fin.
Ron Finley.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank
He
you.
does a great
Yes.
master class, and my gardens are based off of his what he said to do. So
Okay.
it's awesome. Yeah, Ron Finley.
He's phenomenal, and I'm glad to hear that he is still active. And if he's doing a master class, that's great. He's certainly one to recommend. Second, and again, I'm blanking on the name, but I've shown this to a lot of classes. The one on leadership. It's the Dancing Man on the
How to Start a
Hill.
Movement by
How to start
Derek
by
Sievers.
Derek Sievers, How to Start a Movement.
Yes.
And that is a classic. I One time I taught a LIBA class. So here at the university, we've got these freshman writing classes, and I was teaching one. Stephen Monroe over there asked if I could teach one, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll teach one on leadership. It was political leadership was like
Yeah.
the theme of the class, but I showed that video because it's so fun, but it really did exemplify the importance of the first follower
Yeah.
with someone with an idea with no followers is the lone nut.
That's right. Yeah.
And so the first follower gives the leader credibility.
Yeah.
And that's important. Not only, we talk about leaders, but we also have to talk about the movement and the people that followed. And I used this later on when I taught a class. I've only taught it once, but I'm going to add it to my rotation. It's called The Politics of Protest.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went through all the major protests and some minor protest movements in American history. And so this would come up again was, you know, what turned this movement into a mass movement
Yeah.
as opposed to dying on the vine because the leader could not get followers? What did they do to convince people to come along? And and that's a challenge. That's a challenge. And and so those two talks, those two talks are, I find they're genuine, they're credible, they're relatable. Um, I think we've all dealt with bureaucracy.
A little bit.
And you're like, all I want to do is just the most simple thing in the world. Why can't I do it?
Yeah.
So we've all felt Ron Finley's pain, and we've also probably all come up with ideas that maybe don't go where we want them to go. And it's like, okay, how do we how do we get our ideas off the table, off the drawing board, and turn it into something more meaningful?
Yeah, those are great picks. I love it. Um, one I just wanted to shout out was it was by Bill T. Jones. I cannot find what the title is, but it was him, a singer, and a cellist. Bill T. Jones is a dancer, uh, and it looked like they did an improv. It's like blue curtain, red dot is and they just did this performance. It was and it felt like on the fly they were like playing off of each other, and it was just like the beauty of like at the intersection of creativity, inspiration, and then also skill. They are, you could tell they're immensely skilled people, like, but then putting them all together and just something about that, about, getting good people in a space towards a common goal of creation and seeing what happens. And I think that's the beautiful part about working at a university. Sometimes outside of the bureaucracy is that you do get some cool stuff that happens when good people are together trying to think like, oh, how do we do something? How do we make this thing that we're doing a little bit better?
Well, that's right. And not that we're here to put in a plug for universities, but that is one of the great thing about universities, and it's something I tell my students. So, I teach political science, and one of the books that I'm working on, or it's in the copy editing stage, is on economic development. And, I tell my students that I can predict with, I think, a fairly high degree of accuracy where about 80% of them will end up after graduation. And they're like, what? How? And then I just show them a map of where American GDP is produced,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially where is our economy. And I'm like, this is where the jobs are. So this is where y'all will end up. And it's not rocket science on my part. It's just
Yeah,
here are the odds. This
yeah,
is, 70% of the economy comes from these 50 counties. So there's a better than even chance that y'all will end up here. And uh, that is partly because of the phenomenon you were just describing, where you bring in a lot of people together who have a lot of ideas, and that closeness, that physicalness helps germinate ideas when people can meet at the coffee shop, when they
yeah,
can meet at the library. These places have lots of big universities. And so it produces these ideas. And so it's no accident that the Bay Area and the greater Boston and the Research Triangle, Nashville,
Austin.
Austin, that's
Yeah,
right, are home to so much innovation and growth. And then they're like magnets, they attract students. And then the next year's cohort of graduates will finish and they'll be like, well, there's a ton of jobs in DFW. And so
yeah,
maybe I should look at DFW or Houston or any of those cities. And and so that's what happens. And I think for people like you and I, we enjoy that university setting because we are lifelong learners
yeah,
and are just constantly curious. And there's no better place to work than a university if you are intellectually curious.
yeah. Well, and speaking of that, we'll pivot to the
Yeah,
to the book. I mean, and that's another thing, right? TED Talks is like where you get some talented people, or there's have some sort of an idea we're spreading, right? And invited to provide a talk, right? And so the TED Talks book, I don't know, for me, and this is like, well, why should we even be talking about this book? Um, like for me, it was like, there's at a minimum, Chris Anderson has seen a lot of good talks. So there's
right.
wisdom there, right? And like, and the mechanism of TED, there's been a lot of just brilliance that has gone through
Mhm.
that venue. And so at a minimum, even by osmosis, there's going to be something of value that's within this book about how to deliver a talk. I don't know what drew you to reading the book. I know it's been a while since you read it originally.
Well, 100%. Because of the way they've structured TED, and there are all these talks now. Their annual one. which had been in Vancouver for years, and now I think they've moved it to a new site. Um, but what drew me to the book is so we had our first TEDx event in 2016, and then they have a rule if you're getting a license to that you are limited to 100 people in your audience unless you go to a TED event. And then at that TED event, you can
Wow.
get some uh, training and you can meet other people who have also hosted. So myself and one of our organizers, Lizzie Wicks, we were very thankful the provost paid for our trip up there and for our conference fees and registration and all of that. So we got to go to Banff for TED Summit. And so we got to experience one of these TED events, and it was like 4 days of great talks, and those were in the afternoon and the evening. But in the morning they would have workshops, and there were about 1,000 people there, and it was this one was great because it was all the TEDx organizers from all over the world.
Oh, wow.
And so we got to meet people from Kenya and Australia. I met the lady who puts on uh, TEDx Sydney in the Sydney Opera House.
Oh,
I was just like, oh my goodness. So they were just, in my mind, all stars.
yeah.
And Chris Anderson was there. And this book came out right, I want to say in 2016 is when this book came out.
Mm.
We were there during Brexit. Like literally the vote for Brexit occurred
Oh,
while we were there. And so we're having all these great conversations. And at some point, that's when I learned about the book, or maybe the book had just come out. And I thought, oh, okay, this will be great. So what we started to do is we would order copies of the book and give a copy to each speaker
mm.
ahead of their talk because we thought it would be more credible. I mean, who are we to tell people how to give a talk?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we're like, well, here's the head of TED, here's his official advice on how to do it. And then I would have all the students read it. And that way, when we worked with the individual speakers, we would try to uh, take those lessons and values from the book. Because in many ways, the book has a lot of concrete lessons. You could think of them as bullet points, but also it's really about the value system of like how you get an idea across.
Right.
Like that's the bigger lesson. And talks are one vehicle. A great book is another vehicle. A poem is a great vehicle. A
Right.
movie, right? But in this sense, okay, you know, what are people going to take away from their time with you? And so the book is really about that. How to make sure that people remember what you want them to remember and feel the way you want them to feel after the book. And so after I read it, I was like, okay, well, we just have to share this book,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of how it started for us.
Well, and just like at the beginning, where it's like, this is the oldest form of what entertainment and education was sitting around the fire and waiting for somebody to stand up and start communicating, and it's like we're embracing that. And it's like that tapping into the humanity of person to person. Yes, there's technology that can enhance it, but this is as human as it gets.
This is a grown-up version of the campfire, stories around the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout or something like that growing up, and everyone's telling stories. And one of Chris mentioned this in the book. It's one of the TED Talks where a researcher, she's explaining she has studied language and storytelling, and one of the things she learned is that the way we communicate with each other is different during the day than it is at night. During the daytime, we're functional and we're utilitarian. We're working and we're giving orders and we're doing things. At night, you gather, you have dinner, and you tell stories about your day. And so how we communicated, and I had never really thought about it that way, but it's true. At
Mm-hmm.
work, I talk differently than if I were talking to the same people, but we're at home sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
It's a different style. And, and so Chris is trying to, you know, get the reader, the audience of that book to, appreciate for the speaker to really think ahead of time with intentionality of what kind of style are you trying to bring to your audience and the listener so that you can engage with them appropriately.
Yeah. Well, and think about like what the this is a bad word, necessariness, the,
Yeah.
the why this book is needed. And I think you got it right there, is that you've been given a gift of somebody's time, right? And somehow you've been allowed to stand in front, or given time in front of the campfire, whatever. And like, how do you like treat that as a gift, right? And not just like willy nilly use it again, we're aware, folks, that might not use our time as well as others, but like having that, like, how do we treasure that? And I remember I had a class with David Williamson Schaefer up at Wisconsin. It was a subtitle of this was humor of this class. It was like educational learning sciences communication, something like that, but the subtitle for this class was how to make PowerPoints that don't suck. And anyway, because he said, like, no matter what, even if you have like an 8-minute talks that I know the American Educational Research Association conference is going on right now in LA, and that you might have 8 minutes, but 8 minutes in front of 80 people, you multiply that out, you've got a lot of minutes that you've been gifted. How are you going to use it
Oh, that's a great
effectively?
point.
And so I think this book is like treating it like, no, 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 value those minutes, use them well, and let's use them for a purpose, not just, to stroke an ego or something. But what makes this book
Well,
necessary for
no,
you?
that's right. And uh, I will say with some of the speakers we had, and this is one of those things you don't really recognize until hindsight and really experience is some are there really to promote themselves.
Mm,
Those are never the best talks.
yeah.
They are never ever the best talks. And I'm being completely honest when I say that. People who are promoting ideas give the best talk
Mm,
because you can instantly tell when someone is promoting themselves or their brand,
yeah.
or they're not saying their company or their website, but they really want you to go in that direction, and that's not an idea.
No.
It's in and so then I feel like you are taking advantage of people's time,
Mm,
and I resent that. And Chris talks about this in the book. The audience can pick up on that pretty quickly. We are sophisticated, and I'll be honest, the people who are watching TED Talks, going to TED events, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's a sophisticated audience because this is an audience that wants to learn. We are
yeah.
going above and beyond to continuing education. So we're the sort of people who absorb information all the time, and we can kind of spot someone who is in it for themselves versus the idea. And 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 so it so there's a lot of reasons why this book was helpful. The so I would want to give the book to everybody because I would want them to read it and think honestly to themselves, why am I applying to give a TED talk? Why do I want to give the TED talk? Is it about me or is it about the idea?
Yeah.
And for people to be kind of honest, and then that way when we would give them feedback, they would know where we were coming from. It's like, no, we need you to promote the idea more than your well, here are the three things my business has developed.
Yeah.
Not interested. Not
Yeah.
interested. The other issue is uh, and to our dearest colleagues, I say this with all advanced apologies. Professors are really hard to work with. we we are some
What?
different. Stop the presses.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, gonna New York Times is gonna put that on Twitter or X or something.
Yeah.
New revelation.
That's right. Yeah.
So, uh, professors, we are set in our ways, and often because we 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 consider ourselves to be the smartest person in the room. And so this can be challenging for a professor to get feedback from undergraduates. It's always the other way around.
Mm,
And so that can be challenging. And we are all used to being the um, lecturer, standing at the podium. Everybody look at me. I have command of the room for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. And so then professors, even even the best of us can get um, siloed in how we think it's appropriate to deliver information.
yeah.
And none of our lectures are only 18 minutes
Yeah.
or 16 minutes or whatever it would be. And we would
Hmm.
intentionally, the rule was 18 minutes. We would try to come in around 12 to 14, knowing that they would usually come in long and finish around 15 or 16, but we didn't want to bump up against that 18-minute rule. And so working with professors, and so this was another reason to me the book was useful. It's like, please read this book to start thinking about how to give a TED talk, which is different than a conference presentation. It's different than a lecture. It's different than, oh, here was my research grant. Here's what I did. It's not what we normally do.
Yeah.
And, and so that's why that book was helpful.
Yeah. And and again, I think anyone that is given time in front of people, any sort of educator will get value out of it, even though it is a very specific kind of talk that they're talking about. But there's still like, oh, there's all these lessons I think that you can grab and thinking about teaching better, which is what we try to do on Amazon Planet as well. But what what idea challenges or stretches you from within the book?
Well, for me, it's uh, making sure that so a couple of things. I tend to forget what the students know or don't know.
Mm.
And I assume that they can hear my thoughts and know with me.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget. I'm like, don't you guys know this already? I've told you this before. And I'm like, oh, wait, that was a class 2 years ago. They, in fact, don't know this.
Yeah.
And and so you have to remember, okay, who's your audience? What is their prior knowledge? And uh, I, I've been teaching for 20 plus years, and every semester I still go through what I'm going to present to the students, and I'm constantly tweaking and taking stuff out and adding because you don't want to get too deep into the weeds too quickly and you lose them.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go too slow. And so one of the things with the book is like, okay, how can you convey the information you need to convey in a short period of time where you don't lose them? And I think that's something that every teacher, professor, lecturer has to grapple with.
Hmm. Yeah. That idea, and this was a core principle I underlined from 12. I'm going to quote from the book, but uh, there was a speaker, Sophie. She had this metaphor. Your number one mission as a speaker is to take something that matters deeply to you and to rebuild it inside the minds of your listeners. And I think that goes back to kind of what you're talking about. Like, if they don't have the foundation, I might have to build some foundation that they, before I can even build on my idea. Or as they later in the book, they talk about this idea of priming, like this idea of like getting someone probably through a story or something to feel something so that you can then, oh, now there's this idea. Oh, that idea makes a lot of sense given that context that you've just explained to me. And like, but I like that idea of rebuilding it. That means like, there's some carefulness in rebuilding. You're not just like going to throw it in there. Like, no, 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 we got to set things up. I don't know. It kind of offers the sensitivity you need to have in having that conversation.
That's a great way of looking at it. It has made me think about other ways besides myself that I can convey the information.
Mm,
And so I will say over the last 5 or 10 years, I've been far more likely to include podcasts, NPR stories, and a lot more pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and it just like in the slides. And so if I'm talking, so I do a lot of court cases in my classes. I'll just even if I just pull up a picture of the defendant,
Mm-hmm.
or the appellants, and the appellees, whoever's in the cases, to help humanize it. I find that that alone makes a difference, because then the students, oh, they see the person. Or earlier, for instance, we were talking about redistricting. So before we start lecturing about redistricting, first, now I just show them the maps.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, how many of you are from like Atlanta or Dallas? And some will raise their hands. So then I'll show them the map. And I'm like, now you live there. Does this make sense to you? Do the people in this part of the district have a lot in common with the people way over here? Or something like, and they're like, well, why did they do this? Why did they do that? Then I can lecture and talk
Yeah.
about the different court cases.
Yeah.
So I've learned, like, okay, um, how to draw them in, or I shouldn't say I've learned. I'm constantly working on how to draw them in. I feel like teaching is one of those things where you are always just trying to improve. I don't think I'll ever personally be satisfied, like, oh, I don't have to change anything ever. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So trying to uh, make it relevant to the students. And it's also uh, how I structure besides my lectures, how I structure the class, I've changed. And I would say this book and the TED experience kind of has put me on like a 7 or 8 year journey of like rethinking my own like approach to the classroom.
Mm.
And so I think that's, I don't want to lay it all at because of the book, but the whole experience for me with TED of like conveying ideas.
Yeah.
And especially when, I'll just say, a lot of them are science talks. We had one of our professors who had worked. Do you remember several years ago when they proved Einstein's theory of like the time space-time continuum, that time actually bends?
Mm.
So this was several years ago, and one of our physicists was on this team that helped make this discovery. So we had her do a TED talk. Okay, there's no way I'm going to understand the physics, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not.
Uh-huh.
But she had to make the talk so that we could all understand it, or at least relate to it.
Yeah.
And and so that's for me another reason why this book is useful, because it really talks to people of like how to take any subject, no matter how dense, and make it relatable.
Yeah. Well, and your example from before, was that the Hadron Collider? Is that the big circle thing? Was that
That's
where the research was done, or am I making
that's
that
a
up?
different one. That's
Okay.
that's the one in France. This is the um they've got these it's one there's one in Louisiana. There's a few around the planet, but they were essentially measuring how light goes around. I can't remember if it was around black holes, but it was the idea that time bends. And at that point, my mind just kind of goes kablooey.
But still, hey, you're able to
But it's
remember
pretty
it.
cool.
Yeah,
It's
you
pretty
got that.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like thinking about like your example from you had before with like, hey, we're going to talk about this court case. We're going to talk about redistricting. We're going to talk about, but I'm going to use technology to connect to several people in the audience that are from this context. And now they're leaning in a little bit more, or even too, like I might not be from there, but now my friend is leaning in who I'm sitting next to, like, oh, now I'm leaning in. And so like, at the end of the book, which I really loved, and this is kind of like one of those disruption things, is sometimes like, oh, technology, and there's lots of fears around technology, but
Mhm.
that technology allowed you to bring more humanity into your talk rather than if you just would have talked about it, yeah, hey, that's Dr. King up there, I'm going to listen to him anyway. But now you were able to like not only talk about a place I'm from, but actually like point on a map. Hey, you're from here. Look at this. Make these connections. Use your context. Does that make sense to you? I'm just curious. And now all of a sudden we've got folks that are engaged in it, and it's more a better exchange of ideas because you've leveraged technology. And now I'm more connected to you, the speaker, because of what you did. And I love that, like that idea of this is a better way of tapping into the humanity and that exchange, a better fireplace, right? Or better
Mm,
fireside
mhm.
talk. That and it seems like is that sound like the journey that you're on how to do those sorts of things better in order to tap into those connections that you have within your classes.
It is, and I'll admit. So a couple of things. One thing is I'm better now at swallowing my pride and asking for help,
Mm.
and uh, and as a result, so I've done some of these CETL grants that we have here,
Oh
Center for
yeah, yeah.
Excellence in
Mm-hmm.
Teaching and Learning, to try to work on engagement with students in the classroom. And as as a result of that, I'm willing to try new things. And I tell the students that on syllabus day, on the first day, I come out and I just tell them, I am trying new things this semester. Let me know if they work. And if they don't work, I may not try it again the next semester, but I'm going to try
And I'm
new.
sorry.
Yeah, that's right. And I apologize in advance. You don't have to put it in the
Yeah,
student
yeah,
evaluation, but you
yeah.
can, but
But
whatever.
if it works, you're welcome. There you
But that's right.
go.
That's right. And and I tell them that, and so as an example, and this is something that, at what I liked when we went to TED, and I actually ended up getting to go to another uh large TED event in uh Palm Springs, which if you're ever
Nice.
given a free trip to Palm Springs,
Heck yeah.
you just gotta go.
Yeah.
You gotta go. And so uh they really encourage audience participation, not necessarily during, but like at the events. So they'll have lots of ways for members of the audience to get to know each other and connect. And so it sounds so simple, and I'm sure people have been doing this forever, but I got stuck in my ways. And so now when I'm talking and I always stop, hey, does anybody have any questions or comments? And it's kind of silent. And now I tell them, talk amongst yourselves for 2 minutes about whatever it is that I just and I'll walk around while they're talking. And then I have found it so much easier for them to raise their hand
Yeah.
once they've been talking amongst each other first. They get a little more confidence that they can raise their hand and say something that others are also thinking. And so it's little things like that, but it's the idea of engagement and getting them connected to the material, because lots of times some of this stuff, political science students they just want to talk about what's happening now.
Yeah.
But we in our classes, we have to tell them what's happened in the past so they understand how we got to where we are now.
Yeah.
um, the court cases don't make any sense if, in my African American legal experience class, if I'm talking about affirmative action, it doesn't make any sense if you don't know about Jim Crow
Yeah.
ahead of that.
Yeah.
So you got to work your way through, but sometimes they're kind of waiting to get to the more contemporary stuff. And so it's like finally I was like, I've got to figure out how to um, break the ice so that they're more communicative.
Yeah.
And
Because I love that. I wish I could. I'm going to bottle that up and give it to my student. Because like sometimes like silence equals understanding. Oh, no one asked the question. They must all get it, right? Versus no, no, no. Talk to your neighbor and be like, what is he talking about? I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe we should ask a question. And all of a sudden now you have confidence to ask a question because you got somebody with you to do it. Or you've talked to somebody, they get it a little bit better than you do. And now you'll have better understanding because they don't speak the same way that you speak. And so like there's just and they just got it. And sometimes that person that just gets it offers a better explanation than the professor who's like sometimes it's harder to explain sometimes.
well, and we forget where they are. And so um we always have this issue. It's always on social media. At the beginning of each academic school year, there's always some list that goes around that says students born this year, or
Yeah, yeah.
entering freshmen this year were born in this year, and blah blah blah. And uh one a student the other day told me something that just broke my heart. She said, she said, well, her mom graduated from high school in 2002.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I was like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, thank God for Top Gun Maverick because I could still
Right.
bring up the my
You,
my
you,
Maverick references.
well, that's exactly where I was going with this, is that uh, every year I have to check my references and my understanding of what's recent. And it dawned on me last year. I was at a journalism conference, and I was teaching 101, which is our intro class that semester. And I told the audience something that they were, and I was just like a panelist. I wasn't really a speaker or anything, but I was just, representing political science. And I was telling them that most of my freshmen now don't remember Obama.
Mm,
A-
wow.
And and they were like, "Huh?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, he left office in 2016. That was 10 years ago. Our freshmen were 8. They
Yeah.
were in third grade.
Mm-hmm.
Third graders aren't really paying attention to politics."
Yeah.
And he was elected when they were, you know, um, he was first elected when they were born.
Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
not uh, and so I just talk about, oh, well, Obama this, Obama that. And, you guys remember the a fight over the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh no. it, and so getting them to talk more helps it, and it slows the class down. And I've learned, and this is also something that Chris Anderson talks about. He's like, professors especially, because we believe our job is to acquire and disseminate information
Mm-hmm.
as research, especially here at a research university.
Yeah.
And so we want to tell everybody everything we know, but that's impossible in an 18-minute talk, and it's certainly impossible in one lecture. But no matter how much I lecture, I could tell them more.
Yeah.
And it's forced me to kind of think about how much information should I be covering in the semester, which then forces me to rethink how much should I cover in each lecture,
Yeah.
and what do I want them to be able to know on a test, or when they're writing a paper or something like that. So uh, it's really forced me to kind of like slow down and like rethink a lot of my classes. And so as I've developed new classes since, I feel like I'm better at not overloading the students from day one.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that gets into like things about teaching better is like that idea of what's valuable, right? And having constraints, right? Having the constraints of 18 minutes for a TED talk. Like, I also do some practice. I teach teachers, so we do some practice teaching in our classes, and I have them do a 10-minute lesson. They're like, it's too short. Or, it's too short. I'm like, well, what can you do in 10 minutes? Like, right, what's essential for this thing if you're going to model something that you're teaching to third graders versus even my high school students? Like, I can't really do that. Well, it's a challenge. Try it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what happens. And it's amazing what you can do when you put those constraints on it, because it does make you boil it down into what is essential, what is the important, what is the the kernel that you're trying to communicate. And so I think that's a good challenge. What else from this text maybe has helped you in your own teaching, either in redesign or even how you facilitate anything? I mean, if you've shared a bunch of stuff, so if we've exhausted, that's fine. But I'm sure there's more.
Well, I have the students do in I haven't done this in my intro class, only because my intro classes are larger. I tend to have between like 120 and 200. And so some of these in class exercises are just a little too hard. And this is where the physical design of your rooms makes a difference. When you're
Yeah.
in a lecture hall where the seats are bolted
Fixed. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they can't move, like that really makes a difference, because I
Yeah.
want the students to be able to get up and like turn their chairs and face each other.
Right.
But I do a lot of ending the class with a prompt, and then I have them get into different groups, and I even have their names up there, like group 1 through 8. And I make sure to rotate them throughout the semester, because I want every student to be in a group with every other student at least once or twice throughout the
Hmm.
semester.
Nice.
And I give them a prompt where they have to answer some question related to what we've talked about, because uh, this is, for me, it's like, okay, first students have to like know the facts, then they have to understand it, then they apply it, kind of like Bloom's
Yeah, yeah.
taxonomy, right?
Right.
That sort of path. And I feel like with TED, from the book and my experiences with it, is you are being exposed to something, you're hearing some facts, and then I think what TED wants is for you to then continue the journey on your own. And so, long way of answering your question, I have completely rethought my learning objectives because it's like, okay, well, what is the objective here? Is it for the students to memorize every detail of 38 different court cases I'm teaching them?
Yeah.
That's not, no, they're not going to remember that.
Yeah.
And so it's made me rethink, like, well, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, I want you to be able to go home to mom and dad and over dinner be able to explain to them what you learned and why it
Mm-hmm.
matters. And if
Yeah.
you can do that, and you can do that to a future employer,
Yeah.
what did you took a lot of classes from this Dr. King guy. What did he teach you?
Yeah.
Can you confidently and competently answer that? And so it's made me rethink my learning objectives, which, kind of like backwards engineering the class.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, how do I get them to achieve that? Um, and these TED Talks, it's like, you've got a million ideas. How do you distill it into 15, 16 minutes and get them to want to learn more afterwards?
Well, just what you communicated there, you're turning your class from a, you know, whatever, however many court case, like basically trivia, right? Like trivia about all these different cases to no, no, no. What's the ideas around here? What's the point? Why did I give you these cases and not all the other cases? Right? This is there's a through line here to communicate.
So that's the word in the first chapter of the book, or the second chapter of the book. He talks about through line.
Yeah.
And for my wife and I, Amy, one of our favorite podcasts, NPR has one called Throughline, and it's a history podcast, but it's called Throughline, and that's very much the right idea, that they're not going to remember all the details. I'm not going to know the math. I'm not of a physics talk, but I can remember the idea that, um, out there in space, there are some events out there that we didn't think were possible, but we now prove that they're possible. And what that means is there's a lot more out there that we know we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be prepared for who knows what. It's not, our knowledge isn't fixed.
Yeah.
And so that's the through line that I can take away from that and then apply that to all aspects of my life.
Yeah. Nice. This is good. What where does this fall short? So like, this is a great book, right? But is there anything that like remained unanswered for you or felt incomplete with the book?
Well, I wouldn't say incomplete, but it's very much geared towards giving a talk on a stage.
Yeah.
It's limited in that sense. So if you are being invited as a speaker somewhere, 100% I recommend it. If you're in our position where, okay, I'm giving 30 lectures
Yeah.
over a period of 4 months, okay, uh, I'm going to use some bullet points sometimes, Chris. Sorry, I
Yeah.
know you don't want that, but look, sometimes
That's right.
sometimes it makes sense because there's 2 points from this court case I want them to take away, and I'm going to bullet point them because I'm not
Yeah.
going to put the whole text of the decision
Yeah.
on the PowerPoint. So, um, and and in the classroom sometimes I use the slides to help me keep on pace
Yeah.
and remember. And so when I can look at the presenter view, and it's like, okay, what's the next case I'm talking about? And so it would be nice to have a version of this book that is kind of for the more mundane speaker,
Yeah.
just the everyday in a classroom setting, when the students kind of get bored of you because they're like, oh, we've seen this show before. How can you spice it up and mix it up? So that's something that would
Yeah.
be helpful.
Yeah. I had Francis Sue. He was the president of MAA. on a few, and he wrote this book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing, and he talked about having a moment of enchantment, like a mathematical enchantment, at the head of his math classes, which is like, you could probably connect that to something within the TED Talk. Like, hey, here's a one, it got people to class on time, and two, like all of a sudden it got everyone leaning in and like learning about something. Maybe it's not directly connected with what they're going to learn, but it's like, oh, Dr. Sue cares enough to like, hey, he's going to engage us from the beginning. Now we're hitting some things that might be a little bit more mundane, but at least I know there's this here that's going to get us
Well,
leaning in, which is
well,
kind of
well,
nice.
well, he did say that, Chris did in the book. He wrote that it's a useful technique is you kind of set something up like, oh, there's going to be a twist, or
Mm-hmm.
something to the story that you're not expecting. And uh believe it or not, I can end my classes talking about this political stuff on a cliffhanger. And I I'll be telling a
Dun,
story
dun,
like,
dun.
yeah, and I'll be like, okay, so let me tell you guys real quick about the election of 1948. And it had this guy Strom Thurmond, and he had Harry Truman, and he had Dewey, and I'll show him the picture of Truman holding up the newspaper saying that Dewey won. And I'll say you had three candidates, and you don't really see that anymore. So you had three candidates, and this one, blah blah blah. And then the election night happened, and you're never going to believe what happened. I'll tell you the rest on Wednesday. Bye. Have a good day. And they're like,
Nice.
huh? What?
That's
And
awesome.
um,
Because I don't
you,
remember. Was there President Dewey? What was
right,
there?
right, yeah, like, huh?
Yeah.
And maybe they'll look it up because they don't want to wait. And
Hey,
that's great.
great.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And so, that idea of trying to have a hook
Yeah.
in your talk
Mm-hmm.
that will resonate, and like you say, have them lean in a little bit and make sure that they're hearing, and they're really focused on you. I think that is key. you know uh, he's got a lot of great advice. Many of it everyone's heard, and you don't need me to regurgitate.
Yeah.
But the making eye contact, I do make a point in the classroom, and usually my not all of them, but usually I'm in rooms big enough where I can kind of pace, and I kind of go from side to side. And I've got one of those clickers, so I don't have to just
Yeah.
stand at the podium, and that helps. And so you can just kind of walk from side to side, and that kind of mixes it up too, because I'm always just thinking, like, you don't want to speak in a monotone voice where you're at the
Yeah.
same spot, and they go to sleep on you.
That's right.
So
But just having intentionality, yeah, is great. So that's a good and again, lots of you may be overthinking some things, but again, for an 18-minute talk where you're in front of people, it could be put out to millions. Yes, you should think about all these details, and so there's lots of good stuff in there. Where would you put
100%.
this? Where would you put this book? Is it a core text, occasional like leaf through? Is it a seasonal return? Where is this on the main bookshelf? Where is this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's on my, well, you can't see it. It's on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
And it's one for me. I haven't used it in classes, but it is one that I have recommended
Mhm.
over and over again. And it especially with, I know you as well work with a lot of honor students here
Yeah.
who are more likely to be in front of an audience, giving a talk, giving their thesis defense, and when we're working through their presentation ahead of time, every single time I'm like, you can take this out, you can take this out, you can take
Yeah.
this out. You've got 10 or 15 minutes, just tell a story.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I try to have mine. I just say, look, have as many images and few words. And I said, with each image, just tell a story about why does this matter, and then move
Yeah.
on to the next one,
Yeah.
because no one's gonna no one's taking notes.
Yeah.
So uh, so it's, I would say it's a reference manual for me, in the same way the thesaurus is,
Nice.
and my grammar books, which I don't look at as, I just do it all online now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean.
those, so I kind of look at it as like a reference manual.
Nice. So, before we end, I'd like to ask a couple questions. One is maybe it's not related to the conversation we had because we did talk a lot about teaching. But first, what's something you've been learning lately that's shaping your teaching?
So I'm in this cohort called the Character of Leaders Initiative through the Department of Philosophy. And they received a wonderful grant from Wake Forest University, actually. And the idea is we focus on these moral virtues of respect, fairness, integrity, intellectual humility,
Hmm.
and try to think about how do we instill those virtues in our classrooms. uh, and so part of this is, with the grant, I'm going to develop a class. So I'm going to develop a class on political rhetoric.
Oh.
And the class is going to be on how has rhetoric changed,
Hmm.
political rhetoric in America changed over the years, and what type of values come out through the rhetoric. And also so in my classes, when I put the students in groups, I mean, just the other day, we're often, this is politics, so we're often talking about contentious issues. And so for me, it's important to try to make sure I model those values
Oh yeah.
and demonstrate those values, but also that the students know when we're having these contentious discussions, what should come first is respect, fairness, intellectual humility,
Yeah.
integrity, and that no matter what someone says, whether we agree with it or we disagree with it, how do we um, uh, take in what they're telling us, and then how do we respond?
Yeah.
So that way we are not violating kind of those norms. And so it's a challenge because I think these are concepts that we inherently agree with
Yeah.
and try to model, but I haven't necessarily thought about those with intentionality.
Yeah.
And so this cohort that I'm with. There's probably 15 or 20 faculty from I would say we're mostly in the College of Liberal Arts, but I don't think we're all in the College of Liberal Arts. And are um, and it's a 3-year program, so there'll be two more cohorts of this.
Nice.
And so that is really getting me to think. As an example, one of the things, we had a book club, and we've talked about discretion,
Mm.
rules versus discretion. And one of the books we read is making the arguments that we should have fewer rules and more discretion. So we've talked about the pros and cons of this. And you can imagine in your classroom, we exercise discretion all the time.
Yeah.
And uh, we tell ourselves it's for the good of the class, it's for the good of the students, um, and making sure we're doing it ethically and fairly, and using our discretion with integrity, and not um any untoward bias.
Nice.
So it's a lot of fun. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it. I'm
That
enjoying it.
that,
These are
that sounds
the
cool.
I'll just say this is the benefit of having tenure, right? Is you have more time for self exploration.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for talking to other professors on podcasts,
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And last one.
Sure.
What's a piece of physical media that's been meaningful enough that you'd put it into somebody else's hands? So I've gotten into like actually collecting movies. So when I talked about Top Gun Maverick, I own it on Blu-ray, actually. And so like if there's a movie or a book or a record, right, that you would feel valuable, like, hey, you should go read this, listen to this, watch this. Uh-oh, I'm gonna pull something down.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Well, man, I think I gave it away. So
Hey, that's perfect then.
it's the only how to win friends and influence people.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
How
yeah.
to win friends and influence people. I have one time I ordered like 10 copies of the book, but it's the only book I've ever read that I took notes from, and it was in my old office. I had notes taped above like my computer to
Uh-huh.
just as a constant reminder of, like, you say the other person's name,
Hmm.
right? You repeat it back, right? The sweetest word in the in language is to hear your own name, right?
That's right.
And some of those lessons I thought were so powerful and useful and apt. Um, and so that is a book I feel that, especially for students, who, you know I think with our favorite students, you start to feel a little paternalistic toward them. Like you want them well, and you kind of think of them as, they're not quite your own children, but like you get a soft spot for some of them. You've had them in class two or three times, and they're going out in the world, and you're like, good luck, keep in touch. You take this with you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them, I'm like, look, the language is a little dated because it was written 100 years ago, but
Yeah.
the lessons are as true today as ever. And I can't think of a better book to me that can help you develop good relations with all the
Perfect.
people in your life. And if you can do that, then you'll succeed.
And you know what? You could probably find it easily in a used bookstore somewhere too.
That's right.
Probably somewhere.
That's right.
Good.
That's right. That's right.
Always good.
Yeah.
Well, Marvin, thank you so much for spending time with me here. I appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation, and again, all that you do for the university. It's great to be a benefit. Benefited not only even from the TEDx but also from the running club. Everything. Like, I appreciate all that you do for folks around here.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
All right, there's my conversation with Dr. Marvin King on the book TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking. Before we wrap up, here's a question to carry with you this week. What's your favorite TED Talk? One, if you don't know, you haven't explored it, go look. Go find something. There's always something cool. Especially there's the official TED Talks, but then there's all the TEDx events. And I remember seeing one about Andy Weir and his kind of unorthodox path to publishing The Martian. It was kind of cool. There's another one, I think with Dolph Lundgren, that was interesting. I mean, just the random ones. Also put links in the show notes to the ones that that Marvin King and I mentioned earlier in the episode. But what's your favorite TED Talk? And also too, then, what does that lead to? What does that favorite TED Talk mean for how to communicate ideas? What is that telling you? What can you do to think about it? And I think about the one that I pointed up, the dancing one. And again, I'll find a link and I'll put it in the show notes. Just the power of really prepared people doing wonderful improvisation. I remember there's a dancer, a cellist, and a singer. And really prepared, skilled and prepared people coming together and putting those gifts into this magic stew and letting good stuff happen. And I think we see that a lot of times in good teaching as well. That's going to do it. That's it for today's conversation. Thank you to Marvin King. Show notes are available at amazonplanet.com/episode 142. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a colleague. It really helps more folks find these conversations. You can also reach out with ideas, questions, or opportunities by sending me a note to joel@amazonplanet.com or join the email list to stay connected and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for spending time on Amazon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. Peace.